It is Monday, the 1st of June 2020. I am your host, Nicholas George, bringing you back into episode 5 of HistoRE. You may remember on the previous episode of HistoRE, which came just over 3 weeks ago, we covered the story of Ganesh and what Ganesh means to Hindus and his overall significance within the Hindu faith. So where have I been the past 3 weeks? Well, I have been stuck in my room, which is more like an office at this point, and I've been completing university assignments, my final one, done and delivered, submitted, and been preparing to move down south, because you may remember on an earlier episode I mentioned I am moving to the south of England, where I will be beginning my first teaching job. So, exciting times, which is, it's good, because I need some excitement in my life, rather than being stuck in my room with no excitement, watching the news, which is very dreary at the moment. So everyone be safe. So this week's episode, you may remember on the last episode, I mentioned we would be covering the story of Rama and Sita next time. So the story of Rama and Sita is a very important one within the Hindu faith. This is because the story is the origin of Diwali, which you may know as the Festival of Lights, which is undeniably the largest, at least on the grandest scale of Hindu celebration there is. And it's also celebrated by Sikhs and by Buddhists, but they celebrate the Diwali for different reasons, which we'll probably cover in a future episode. So we're going to jump in with the story of Rama and Sita, and what better way to jump in down with the story itself. So let's begin. So the story of Rama and Sita begins with, and there are many, I'll start by saying as well, there are many different versions of the story of Rama and Sita which have been adapted over time. At the end of the day, it's a thousands of year old story, so there's been many adaptations to it. So we'll start with the one which I know. So Rama's father had 3 queens. The oldest one was the mother of Rama, and her importance had diminished over time, so of course it's worth mentioning that Rama's father is a king. His youngest wife wanted to be liked by the people, but over time Rama had become more popular, and the people of the kingdom looked forward to him becoming the king. So Rama was basically he was the very much beloved prince within the kingdom. Everyone saw him as this bright beacon of hope for the kingdom. He was going to be the one who would take over from his father and leave the kingdom into a sort of golden age. And the young queen put pressure on Rama's father to send him away, and reluctantly he eventually gave in to this pressure and exiled Rama into the dangerous forest. So Rama's father, despite Rama's popularity and despite Rama being his son, he decided to side with this young queen over Rama. And Rama, being the obedient son, because he's pure and he's full of hope and he's full of promise and he's full of obedience to his father, he did as his father asked. And when Rama tried to say goodbye to Sita, who was basically Rama's girlfriend at the time, she would not hear of it and requested to go with him no matter what dangers would be faced. So this was a sort of undying loyalty to Rama. Sita believed that if Rama had to go, she had to go as well, because she was loyal to him. And she told Rama, "My place is with you." So Rama, Sita, and Rama's brother, Lakshmana, I excuse my pronunciation, anyone, they set off to live in the forest. So Rama's brother is also extremely loyal to Rama. And in this forest lived the 10-headed demon king, Ravana, his sister, and his followers. So Ravana is one of the famous examples of evil within Hinduism, I find. And so is his sister and the followers of him. They're sort of depicted as practicing the opposite of what the Hindu faith would want you to practice. And Ravana's sister fell in love with Rama and tried to seduce him. So this has escalated quite quickly. Rama would have none of it, of course, because not only is he loyal to Sita, he is not going to be too thrilled with the idea of this pure prince, which he is, going out with the sister of the Demon King. It doesn't work. And feeling insulted, Ravana's sister asked Ravana to kidnap Sita so that Rama would give in to her, because of course Ravana's sister would be the only female there left. And Ravana did this by taking Sita to the island of Lanka, which you may recall sounds very similar to the island of Sri Lanka. So for years Rama looked for her but could not find her. He sought the help of the animals through Hanuman, who is the monkey god. That's right, there is a monkey god in Hinduism. This should not come as too much of a surprise to you with the story of Ganesh, which we covered last time, who is, of course, a god with an elephant head, or an avatar with an elephant head at least. He told Rama that Sita was on the island of Lanka. Rama and his brother, together with their army of animals, built a causeway across to Lanka. And a great battle followed. Rama was successful when he slew Ravana with his magic bow. And if you ever see a statue of Rama, which I'm sure you probably have, but you may not have realised it, you will notice that Rama is nearly always depicted with this magic bow. It's a strong symbol of Rama within the faith. So Sita was rescued, but all was not well. Because once Rama had saved Sita, he questioned whether Sita had remained faithful to him after being away for so long and under the evil influence of the even more evil Demon King Ravana. The 10-headed Demon King Ravana, so you know he's extra evil. And Sita was devastated by this and ordered a giant bonfire to be built. So this was going to be a test of purity. If she walked through the flames and came out unhurt on the other side, this would mean she has been true, for the gods have not punished her for doing this. Rama knew his wife had remained true once she did it, of course. And therefore Rama, Sita and Lakshmana returned from the forest to the city. When the people heard the news that Rama was returning, they lit ghee lamps and built bonfires. You may be aware that the lamps and bonfires are used today in the festival Diwali, which, as mentioned earlier, is the most important festival within Hinduism. And this is how it got the name the Festival of Lights. This is where the nickname came from. It's from the story of Rama and Sita. So the Festival of Lights, within Hinduism at least, is a clear celebration of Rama and Sita and Lakshmana's homecoming. And in essence, that is the full story of Rama and Sita. So now we'll just go into a little bit of backstory as to the characters within the story. So Lord Rama is considered a Hindu god. He is a hero of one of the most well-known and cherished books of Indian culture, which is called the Ramayana. And the Ramayana has been passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, even before there was written word. It is most commonly written in Sanskrit these days. And Rama is the seventh incarnation of the god Vishnu. And next to Krishna, Lord Krishna, he is considered to be the most important avatar. So he's the manifest, which mentioned on the last episode of the podcast, that an avatar is a sort of version of God. It's a manifestation of a deity, basically. Rama is considered to be the ideal man and a perfect human, not only physically but mentally and spiritually, which is why he was so loyal to his father when his father asked him to leave, even despite him being the heir to the throne, the prince, the perfect prince, the pure prince. He did so unquestionably and eventually returned both stronger and wiser for it. And most Hindus believe that Rama lived 1.2 million years ago in the Treta Yuga, though that text is dated to around the 7th to 4th century BC. So it's possible he did live 1.2 million years ago. Who are we to say? And Rama's principal devotee was Hanuman, who you may remember from the story was the monkey god. And Hanuman is a symbol of devotion and right action, because when called upon by Rama to defeat the evil king, the evil 10-headed demon king, Hanuman did so without question, bringing his army of animals to do so. And for the sake of honouring his father, Rama accepted 14 years in exile with his wife, Sita, and brother Lakshmana. So, you may remember from the story, we mentioned that Rama went in exile after his father asked him to leave, so the exact amount of years was around 14 years. The entire tale of the Ramayana is Rama's journey to take back his wife that was stolen by the evil king Ravana, Lord of Lanka. And it's widely believed that Rama, Vishnu, and Sita, who is an incarnation of Lakshmi, have one of the oldest and famous love stories of all time. So that is perfectly possible, because with how old the story is, if it was written between the 4th and 7th century BC, this is very much possibly one of the oldest love stories. So that's a very interesting fact to take to a pub quiz, I think. And Rama's bow was so powerful that it could wipe out an entire army, which it did. It destroyed Ravana, the demon king, and all of his armies, and that's what happened. And after defeating the evil Ravana, Rama ruled his kingdom Ayodhya. That's very likely pronounced wrong, so it's Ayodhya, and he did so for 11,000 years, of which the entire 11,000 years was a time of complete peace and prosperity. So this would definitely have been a golden age, as mentioned in the story. And the victory of Rama over Ravana is celebrated in a 10-day festival known as Dussehra, and his return to his kingdom and coronation is celebrated with, of course, Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights. And these are two of the most important festivals within Hinduism, and they are celebrated in many of the other Indian faiths, from Sikhism to Buddhism, etc. So that's how important the story of Rama and Sita is to Hindus. And it's not just Rama who is this important figure within Hinduism, because Sita also is. In a way, Sita is considered by many Hindus as being the perfect example of how a woman should live, because after all, she's one of the central characters of the most prominent epic of Hindu history, which is the Ramayana, and basically she's the epitome of how a female figure should be. Even after spending 14 good long years in exile, Sita never complained about the tough times in her life, and she is known for her loyalty and devotion towards her husband, and basically she's the one woman in Indian history who stands as an inspiration for women of all age groups. So this is how important she is. Mentioned earlier, she's considered to be a reincarnation of the goddess Lakshmi. And Lakshmi is a symbol of prosperity, wealth, success, and happiness within Hinduism. So basically, Sita has all these traits of the goddess Lakshmi, and therefore these are all symbols of virtue, of goodness, and this is the only reason. Well, not the only reason. This is one of the reasons why Rama would fall for her. It's worth mentioning as well that she wasn't the girlfriend of Rama. She was the sort of betrothed of Rama, because of course in those times princes and princesses would be married off into other houses, into other families at a very young age, and it's of course, whereas it can't fully be proven, it's believed that Sita was married off to Rama when she was just 6 years of age. I'm not quite sure how old Rama was at the time, but it's only possible that he was a similar sort of age, although they did marry off younger children to an older child, and then they would wait until they were both a certain age, and then the marriage would be made fully official. But that was common practice back then, so it's not at all that surprising to see that Sita was just 6 years of age when she was married off to Rama. And then of course there's some more facts about the Ramayana, which is the whole story itself. So it's worth knowing that the Ramayana is written in 7 chapters, also known as Kands, which would be the Indian sort of, or the at least the Hindi translation for the word. Like surah is the Arabic word for chapter or verse rather. And these 7 parts are Balkand, which is Rama's boyhood. Then there's and you have to excuse my pronunciation again, it's that word. Ayodhya Kand, which is Rama's life in Ayodhya until his banishment. And then there's the Aranya Kand, which is Rama's life in the forest and his abduction by Ravana. There's the Kishkinda Kand, which is Rama's stay at Kishkinda, the capital of the monkey ally Sugriva. And there's the Sundakand, which is Rama's journey to Sri Lanka. And then there's Yudkand, or the Lankakand, which is the epic battle with Ravana, the recovery of Sita, and their return to Ayodhya. The Uttarakhand, which is Rama's life as king in Ayodhya, the birth of his 2 sons, Sita's test of innocence and return to her mother, and Rama's demise. This can completes the story of the Ramayana. And as with any story which is thousands of years old, potentially millions of years old, there's many different interpretations as to how the story ended for Rama and Sita. There are versions which say, I think they're all sort of universally agreed that Rama eventually died of old age. He came to realize that all humans, or all who enter human existence, must eventually die. And so he did, and he left his kingdom to his 2 children. And there's a lot of this disagreement on the story of Sita. Any Hindu listeners of the show might be able to clarify more on this, because this is only my interpretation. And there seems to be a lot of confusion surrounding Sita. Some versions say that she disappeared during King Rama's rule. There are other versions which say she was punished for a crime she may or may not have committed. There are many different versions which I've come across, and I can't quite decide for myself which version is the most popular or the most well known. So anyone who understands the story of Ramayana better than I do would be able to share and clarify this, because my interpretation is that whereas there are many different versions of the main story, they all sort of feel relatively similar. Whereas with the death part of the story with Rama and Sita, there seems to be a lot of difference, a lot of confusion. So this would be interesting. I read one before where Sita apparently ended up becoming a Jain monk, and she ended up fasting and then eventually died through fasting. But I imagine that's more so a Jain version of the story rather than a Hindu version of the story. Jain's a fascinating religion, by the way, Jainism. It's very interesting. It's very different to some of the other Indian religions, while also having a lot of similarities with them. So Jainism is definitely something we'll come across one day on the show, because it's like all religions which we cover. It's fascinating, and it's not quite as well known as some of the others. So therefore, it would be good to talk about that a little bit more. That's basically it, I think. Ramayana in 20 minutes or so. So of course, next week we will be back to the weekly podcast. We will be doing this weekly once more. No more 3-week breaks to do essays and to prepare to move house. At least until I do move house. When I do move, then there might be another delay in the show while I set up things over there. But yeah, so this was a fun episode to do, because Hinduism is not my strong point within religion. I think I specialize more in Christianity and Islam and Judaism mostly. So when I do these Indian faiths, I do a lot of learning myself when I come to prepare these podcasts. So this should be a fun theme going forward as I learn more, and hopefully you all learn something new as well. So thank you all for listening. I think next week we will look at another religion. I'm not quite sure yet, but as always, I'll ask you all for suggestions, and we'll cover something new. Maybe, because at the end of the day, this is HistoRE, and we haven't covered any of the histo aspect yet. So maybe next week will be a history episode. I don't know. But yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll come to a conclusion, and we'll have a new episode up next Monday. So thank you all for listening. I know this was a relatively short episode, but I didn't quite expect it to be so long or so short. I just kind of didn't know how long this one was going to last, basically. But next week we will be back, and hopefully it'll be a little bit longer. And as always, be well, stay safe. Try not to worry too much about what's going on in the world right now. It's very difficult not to do so. But anyone who's friends with me on social media or outside social media knows that I'm a news addict. But I have found that taking a break away from the news has helped my mental health over the last week, and I therefore recommend that to anyone else. So thank you all once more for listening. Be well, stay safe, and we'll be back next Monday for episode 6 of HistoRE. Take care, everyone.